Wonderful. Well, let's go ahead and get started. It's 12:02. We will record the call, and really excited for today's conversation. We're going to do a couple things on this call. One is we're going to have about a 30-minute conversation with our outstanding panelists to hear from other approaches that our movement partners are making in the issues that we care about, and really hear from them, their stories about how they got involved, what their organizations are doing, so that we can count them as partners and friends, and make sure that we're connecting dots locally from their organizations over to our organization and vice versa. And then we're going to do Erika lead around the horn around some of the legislative efforts that are underway right now. I mean, there's a lot of late breaking activity, some of it in our direction, some of it very much against the reforms that we support and the values that we hold. And so Eric will give us an update on that. And then Alberto has joined us, who is our newest team member and our chief of staff. He's DC based and is just doing an outstanding job hitting the ground running. Comes at this work. Actually, I'm going to do this real quick, Alberto. So I know this is a deviation from the plan, but I think it's important at the outset. I'd love for you to just introduce yourself to folks who haven't had a chance to connect with you yet.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. First off, just really grateful to be part of this community. Alberto Ramos, originally from Las Vegas. As I mentioned in the chat, I'm here in DC now. I'm a Navy veteran, a former submariner. After leaving the Navy, I was a White House fellow in the first Trump administration. And then I was a colleague of Alicia's at New Politics. I was with New Politics for about 3 years, recruiting veterans and national service alumni to run for office. You'll hear a lot more from Alicia about what that work looks like. And then was an appointee in the Biden administration working at Veterans Affairs. This is work that's been meaningful to me for many years. I've known Todd and Eric for a long time. Went out to Nevada to knock on doors in 2022 and 2024, and just really appreciate you guys being committed to continuing your service out of uniform. So grateful to be here.
Thanks, Alberto. We are thrilled to have you on board. So thanks for that introduction. And so after we have our panel conversation, Eric will give us a sense of the legislative updates going on around the country. We'll ask you for your updates. And then time pending, Alberto's got a preview along with Jameson of some evolved messaging and branding that we're going to be launching in the next few weeks here. A redo of the website, but also importantly, a reframe of how we're talking about this work. The teaser on that is moving away from technical explanations of reforms and instead anchoring our work in broader values that we hold as Americans and as veterans. And so he'll have some more to share on that. So that's the plan for today. Please do put your questions in the chat. I'm going to get us started. Cynthia, Alicia, and Erika, thank you all so much for being with us and joining us for this all hands call.
Great to be here. Thank you.
We're in the spirit of efficiency. We are sharing your impressive biographies in the chat. So we've done that. So if you'll forgive me, I'll skip that part because folks have it. But Cynthia, I'm going to ask you to maybe go first. Tell us just a little bit about who you are and how you got into this work. And we'll talk about Represent Women in a little bit more detail in the next question. But just, on you, who are you and how did you get involved in this work?
Yeah, wow. Well, thank you so much. Thanks, Todd, for the invitation. And thanks to everybody who's on this call. My name is Cynthia Richie Terrell, and I live in the Washington, D.C. area. I grew up in rural upstate New York, and I'm part of sort of two interesting threads that reflect somewhat different experiences of America. My Quaker ancestors came here right at the outset, very committed to equality and nonviolence and doing good. Though there is a funny joke about Quakers that we came to the New World to do good and we did well, which was true for a while. Less true now. And my father's family is from the South, and lots of ancestors who were on the side of the South in the Civil War and Battle of Richmond. And my grandfather was in the Navy in World War I, and my father was in the Navy in World War II. And actually, that experience for him, I promise this is related. I'll speed up.
Mhm.
He went in unsure of what his views were. He came out a philosopher and an ethicist. He attended the Nuremberg trials, went on to become a philosophy professor. And he and my mother really both instilled in me in different ways that idea of the community around us being important, not just the community we in the city where we live, but the country and the globe we share, and that idea that we have an obligation to make the world a better place, not for those, just for those whom we agree with, but really for everybody, and that we all do better when we all have access to the same rights. And so that's the frame that I come from. And I worked on campaigns intensively for about 6 years, helped to found the nonprofit Fair Vote that generated some of the ideas around this space, including ranked choice voting and right to vote in the Constitution and the national popular vote, active in all those things. And then for about 6 years have been running this organization, which I will tell you more about later.
Awesome. Thanks, Cynthia. That's wonderful. Actually didn't know a lot of that history, so thank you for sharing that. It was really insightful. Alicia, would you mind going next and
Absolutely.
introducing yourself?
Yeah, I'm Alicia Washkevich, and I went to the Naval Academy. Honestly, they recruited me to swim, and I didn't really know what I was getting into. And before I knew it, I was there. But as tough as it was, I loved every minute of it. But it really solidified for me really a call to service. After my time in the military, I didn't know that you could work in nonprofit and have that be a career. I mean, we could spend a whole day talking about my TAB class and that horrible transition. But I learned pretty quickly that I was a mission-driven individual. And some of the things that were important to me, I worked for the Sierra Club for a little bit. I really loved the environment. But I grew up in a house where my dad was like an NRA card-carrying Republican, and my mom was a teachers union Democrat. And it was still a house of love. And like I could even see my dad cutting out articles from Trap and Field magazine, and he understood, that we might approach different sort of policies in different ways, but there can be a lot of common ground there. So I think that really laid the groundwork for me, after transitioning out of sort of an environmental nonprofit and now here at New Politics, that that foundation of service and of working together sort of across lines of difference and specific policies, but finding a way to continue to be rooted in your service for your community or your country. And that's what we need and our democracy needs moving forward. So it was a perfect transition for me. And similarly to Cynthia, sort of there's a lot of my parents' foundation in that, but really rooted in just sort of how I frame the world, and hope that more folks will frame their service continuing through politics.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Alicia. What year were you Naval Academy grad?
'03.
'03. Okay. All right. I don't know if we have any other '03s on the line, but okay, that's great. I know we're Navy strong on this call, which is great. Thanks, Alicia. Erika, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure. I am Erika Blas, and grew up in Wyoming, went to BYU, and then landed in a nonprofit career because of an internship I got at the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts, where they trained me in grants and sponsorships. So then I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area and had a 15-year career when I met an Air Force intel officer who was at Naval Postgraduate School. And we ended up getting married, and then I was in the military life, never expected that, but have really loved it. We're still active duty. He's about to deploy in a week for 6 months to a year. So we are stationed at Maxwell in Montgomery, Alabama, but More and Women for Ethical Government, my organization, is actually having our annual conference on Saturday. So I'm coming at you from my mom's art studio in Logan, Utah, because I'm out there for that. I didn't work for 10 years after we got married and had 2 boys, but I started following Mormon Women for Ethical Government when it grew. I'll tell you more about that later, out of a Facebook group after the 2016 election. Followed them for years, and then when both my kids were in school full-time again, saw a post for a temporary job that they had and thought, oh, I could do that. I've always very much loved working for nonprofit organizations. I worked, as it says, in healthcare, arts, and community development. And once I started that job, I just rediscovered the part of me that loves working for a good cause. And I especially love working with smart, dedicated women. And so after that temporary job, they invited me to come on as the director of development. And I, of course, said yes, and have been loving it for the last 2 years. So that's me.
Thanks, Erika. Where's your husband headed? Are you able to share?
Wiesbaden.
Where's that?
Outside Frankfurt, Wiesbaden.
Wiesbaden. Okay.
For Ukraine. So who knows how long he'll actually be there.
Okay. And you'll be holding down the home fort in Alabama?
Yeah, we're staying there because my kids are settled and happy, and we have a great support system. We haven't done a deployment since my 10-year-old was 1. We're very lucky that way. So it'll be an adjustment for all of us, but we're ready.
Well, we'll all be saying a prayer for your husband's safety and service of our country. Thank you for that and the sacrifice that you're going to make in the process. And thanks for sharing your story. Erika, can I stay with you for a minute and
Sure.
ask you to tell us what is Mormon Women for Ethical Government and what's the theory here?
Yeah. So our mission is to inspire women of faith to be peacemakers in their homes and communities, and ambassadors of peace, I think is the official language, to transcend partisanship and to courageously advocate for ethical government. So it grew very organically. It's very grassroots. After the 2016 election, there were 4 women who were friends with very differing political views. And they realized they couldn't even talk to each other, let alone the rest of their circles of influence, because it was so divisive. And they thought, this is ridiculous. We are intelligent, principled women. So they started a Facebook group where they started discussing the things of the day. And within a few weeks, through the Mormon Women Network, which is strong, there were thousands of women in this Facebook group. And so over the last 8 years, it has grown into a formal nonprofit. We have a C4 side and a C3 side. And we have 7,000 members from every state in the nation. Of course, most of them are concentrated in the Intermountain West. But we really work to empower our members to become principled civic actors. So we do a lot of media literacy, education, and give women a supporting community that can help them determine really what their principles are and how to act on them. Because sometimes in our faith tradition, it's been you just vote traditionally how your family did or how your husband did, not necessarily on the principles that you're believing, that you're living. And so we have this community, we do calls to action. Our executive director and our advocacy director recently was in DC and delivered over 2,000 letters written by our members to representatives. And we have a robust peacemaking side where we teach women how to have hard conversations and to be not just peacekeepers, but peacemakers in their circles of influence. And of course, we have specific areas of advocacy that we focus on as well. And I know we've loved working with Veterans for All Borders in Idaho last year. And we have a lot of similar values and principles and structure.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a lot
Thanks,
of
Erika.
What else, guys?
No, that's wonderful. That's a great primer. Thank you. Inspiring work indeed, and homegrown, which is the good stuff always. Alicia, would love to hear more about New Politics, an organization that Alberto knows very well, but several of us do as well, but not everyone will.
Absolutely. New Politics was founded by Emily Cherniak. And our whole jam is that we're trying to get folks that have served their country or their communities before into politics and show them that there's a path there. So sort of demystifying everything about how you even step into the political arena I mean, for someone that didn't grow up in a household where it was a very political household or a name that has, served in the political arena before, sometimes it's hard to even know where to start. And there's so many roles. I'm based here in DC, and we even have the ANCs, the Advisory Neighborhood Commissioners, and there's some neighborhoods that don't have anyone that raises their hand. So it's so important to get folks that have served before. So we work with veterans, of course, that have served their country before, but also national service. So AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, frontline workers, folks that work with nonprofit, folks that have chosen and sort of dedicated their life in some form of service to show that there's a path to serve as well in politics. And I remember when I first started, I didn't really believe sort of like the proposition of what we were doing. I felt like, well, we must be charging for our services. But I mean, New Politics is a 527. We raise all of our money so that essentially we can give a campaign advisor for free to folks that are running up and down the ballot. So someone that's a first-time candidate that's running even further local ANC all the way up to, Congress. And we can have these campaign advisors to help hold their hand through whether it's having a conversation with your family and what that looks like, helping to sort of demystify what you might believe about someone doing Oppo research or what it would mean for you if you're running for a school board, to which vendors, are good vendors and how many yard signs do you even need? Because our goal is to really kind of take money out of politics and provide that support that we have for our candidates based truly on our hope that we're not just sort of revitalizing the service professionals into politics, but also trying to help really revitalize that ethos of service back into politics. So up and down the ballot, just trying to get folks that care about their communities and their country first, above and beyond their own personal interests, regardless of their party, trying to help provide them with a resource and someone to kind of hold their hand every step of the way. Even after, if the election doesn't go the way that they want, we have programs and support for folks as they figure out their next steps too. So aside from doing some certainly recruitment and trying to inspire transformational leaders to dip their toe into the political arena and see what it would be like, we're there sort of every single step of the way, from just thinking about entering the arena to the race to even after and what those next steps might be, win or lose. So it's pretty exciting stuff, and we're excited to be here and share with you all. So thank you.
It's vital work that you do, Alicia. And we've had several folks in our network who have run for office with the support of New Politics, and they can speak firsthand to the impact that you're having, irrespective of whether or not you win, which is a huge cliff. It's like if we want everyday citizens stepping in, we've got to help them find that path. It's not easy. Thanks, Alicia. All right, Cynthia, tell us about Represent Women, please.
Thank you. I will. Represent Women was a project that grew out of Fair Vote, and then I applied for nonprofit status, and we started in 2019 in earnest. So we've been around 5 years now, and our goal really is to identify the structural barriers that women face in politics as candidates and elected officials, and address those structural barriers with data-driven policy solutions that level the playing field so that more women can run, win, serve, and lead. There's quite a bit of focus in this country on preparing individual women to run, but the data shows us that the barrier isn't so much ill-equipped women, or it's not so much the women, in fact, at all, but it's really these institutional barriers, like who gets recruited to run and our voting system itself, that really limit opportunities for women in the sphere. And I would say we're motivated in part by, I think, just the original founding conception, the John Adams quote, though maybe Jane said it first, or Abigail, actually, that Congress should be a portrait of the people in miniature. Like, I believe that's true. Everybody should have a voice in government. I don't want a government that somehow is just people who agree with me, because that's not fair to the rest of the country. So, or to other voters. So we're motivated by that as a founding grounding principle. But I also believe, and data confirms, that having more women in elected office would not only make it more representative, but would help to revive and encourage and nurture bipartisanship and collaboration. It would improve policy outcomes, I believe, for everybody in the country. It would help to encourage a new style of leadership that is more collaborative and problem-solving oriented. And I think it would help to create greater trust in our elected bodies, which I think is really at an all-time low. Electing more women to office won't solve everything, but I think it would help solve a lot of things. And we actually don't yet know what both the process and the policy outcomes would look like, but we have enough data from the 80 or so countries that rank above the United States in women's representation. And now with jurisdictions, in part because of reforms like ranked choice voting, where women are winning and holding about half the seats in those jurisdictions, that both the process of governing and the policy outcomes are different. So we are largely, we do our work in a couple different buckets. We do a lot of research because we're so data driven. And then we have a partnerships and program team, and we have a communications team, of course, as well. We produce reports like a gender parity index that tracks women's representation at the local, state, and federal level. We've been doing it for 10 years now. The majority of states get a D for women's representation on the gender parity index, which I think is significant, despite a lot of money spent to prepare individual women candidates. We have a program called our Women's Power Collaborative, which is a platform which may be the most relevant thing to this conversation, that provides an opportunity for folks working on women's representation in the women's representation ecosystem to build bridges and communicate effectively with folks in the democracy reform ecosystem, because the work is hard and we tend to work in silos. So the Women's Power Collaborative is meant to bridge that gap. We also have something called a Women Experts in Democracy Directory, where we're really trying to elevate the voices of women. Hope everybody will join, who would like to be featured on panels and on boards of organizations and so forth, with the idea that we really need all the great women leaders in this space, just like we need everybody else. But really elevating those voices would help provide a richer conversation. And then we do a lot of work on electoral reform, because some of our criteria for projects and programs is what's viable, what's scalable, and what's transformative. And what the data tells us is that the electoral system itself, I'm sure folks have seen data from United America and Todd and others, but we have such a fundamentally uncompetitive election system. It really limits who can run. We spent about $15 billion on House and Senate races in 2024, and 2 challengers won in the entire country. So I think that helps to put in perspective where resources are needed versus places that have opened up the primary system and have a ranked ballot that give voters more power. That's the fundamental thing. And I think that maybe is the common theme that all of us share here, is that we want voters to have the maximum amount of power to determine their representation outcomes. And we don't want political parties determining what those outcomes are. We don't want the people who draw the district lines to determine what those outcomes are. But I want competition in our political process. I think that will be healthy. It'll certainly be necessary for any kind of real ideological diversity in states. And I think it's necessary for electing the kinds of candidates who reflect the interests of their communities.
Really interesting. Thank you, Cynthia. I want to stick with you for a minute, because I know you're literally one of the foremost experts in the country on election reform and representation. Going back to the global comparisons, where do you take inspiration? I thought I read an article post-COVID that talked about COVID response being strongest in female-led countries, and it was resounding and like lots of threads to pull there. But where do you see, like, what does good look like, either hotspots in the United States or globally, and what should we be thinking about in terms of the issues themselves?
Yeah, I remember that was a great question. I think it profiled Germany, Taiwan, New Zealand, and a handful of other countries that those leaders did a good job of listening, of identifying the data, of bringing people together, of sharing information, which is obviously a huge paraphrasing of the situation.
Mhm.
I think some of the themes that we see from countries with governments that are more women-led is more ability for women tend to come together across partisan lines to work on legislation together. That's just a thing that happens in countries that I think are doing a good job, and in states that are doing a good job. There's a great place called the Center for Effective Lawmaking that you guys may have encountered. Really like those guys, and they do a lot of this analysis of what are the conditions for Democrats and Republicans and independents working effectively together, particularly in state legislatures. And that data reveals a real gender frame for that women, for whatever combination of reasons, are more likely to do that in the state legislative process. I think some of the stories that we see coming out of places like Alaska, that has an open primary system, a top 4 system with ranked choice voting and open primaries. And I believe I've read some stories on the breakthrough in the ability to work, the Democrats and the Republicans to work effectively together in Alaska on legislation that matters to all the constituents. And part of that, of course, is the leveling the playing field with the open primaries and ranked choice voting. There's a great, one of my favorite allies right now in this space is Kathy Giesel, who's a state Senate majority leader, Republican. And she's got some just great lines about the difference that the new system made, that she went to every voter's door, not just the ones with signs in the yard for her. She knew that she needed to get votes from every voter, potentially, maybe second or third place votes. So she took their concerns seriously. And then voters in turn can hold her accountable because she's made this commitment to all these voters who helped elect her. So I think that's a good snapshot. But really, overall, I would say Alaska, in the 2022 cycle, elected, I think, the most conservative governor in the country. It elected Mary Peltola, who's a moderate Democrat, Lisa Murkowski, and a number of state legislators who were really able to work together. And I will say, just coincidentally, or perhaps not, the House chamber in Alaska is majority women as well. Both Democrats and Republican women are well represented in the state of Alaska. And in one way or another, that's the story we see happening in jurisdictions with ranked choice voting and open primaries around the country as well. There are about 60 cities that use ranked choice voting, and women hold about 52% of those seats. And there's some great case studies from Utah, where another one of my favorite allies in this work is Amelia Powers Gardner, a Republican woman who was the first woman elected to the Utah County Council with ranked choice voting. And she just brings a perspective that hadn't been considered before on the Utah County Council. So I think they're powerful stories everywhere. I don't want to take up too much time. I could go on and on, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, would love for you to go on. It's really interesting, and really appreciate that perspective. And I think, you said something, Cynthia, that I just want to elevate, because I think it sort of grounds our collective mental model, which is these kind of behavioral appeals are just insufficient. Like, it really is, it's these systems that sort of determine the outcomes.
Yes.
And I think that's the part where most people are just fixated on the horse race, the money, just like, and that's sort of the lagging indicator of a system, either well designed or poorly designed. We would all, I think, collectively argue poorly designed today. And so that's great. So thanks for that. Erika, I want to ask you a slightly different question, which is, I would love for you to talk about sort of where Mormon Women for Ethical Government has staked a claim on election reform specifically, but even more broadly, what are you learning about how to get people, use the word courage in your prior answer? How do you get people out of the shadows or off the sidelines when it seems like there's so much to lose by even just being out there in any way, talking about anything that smells like politics? What have you learned in organizing women, particularly in a faith context, about how to make that process safe?
Well, I think that is one of the most powerful things that MWEG offers, is this community of 7,000 women who can support each other in those efforts, right? Because a lot of them do feel alone in their desire to, make a difference and to and to really act on their principles. And so often people will join MWEG and their comment will be, oh, I've found my people, or I feel at home. So we have an app that there's discussion groups on, and there are many opportunities for them to gather virtually and in person. There are leaders in states that do in-person meetings as well. But I think once women feel that they have the information and knowledge that allows them to evaluate something and feel like they can understand and represent truth or an opinion that they hold that is truly theirs, then they do find the courage to share that with others. And especially after they have the skills to share that in a peaceful way, right? To be prepared for how to react to somebody who has an opposing view or is not interested in your opinion. And so it's the ability to stay curious, stay calm, stay peaceful, because we do have 4 roots that our organization is dedicated to sticking to. We actually have root directors that ensure that everything that we do adheres to the principles, and that is nonpartisan, faithful, proactive, and peaceful. So our whole purpose is to empower these women to actually go out there. It has a significant impact. We find that more and more as MWEG is recognized nationally and in democracy circles, and people are thrilled to find individuals who are willing to speak up in that way consistently and in a calm, peacemaking way. Does that make sense?
Makes
Does that
perfect
answer your
sense.
question?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I just think the discipline and practice of that is so under threat. I mean, I think so many of us are tempted to sort of rage. So that role modeling, I think, is just incredibly powerful. And we'd be really interested in seeing your playbook on how to, kind of maybe learn that skill set more in our network and use that playbook as well. So thank you.
Especially now, because it can be so overwhelming. You literally have to make the choice, as I'm sure you all know. Everything can be so overwhelming. You have to make the choice to stick to your principles and act in the way that you're dedicated to do.
Yeah, and to do it in a spirit of peacemaking, which I think is challenging. Alicia, this will probably be my last question because I'm mindful of time and I only committed to taking 30 minutes of each of your time. But Alicia, you see candidates, and that's sort of, tip of the spear. And I think the folks that are coming in, are doing this, particularly those that have demonstrated service. Alberto, you were speaking to the selection process. We know that there's vetting. So folks coming in wanting to do the right thing. What are you hearing from candidates once they're there about the impediments to doing the right thing? And, particularly amongst those that have self-identified as being country first. That's why they're part of the New Politics Network. How do we support these folks? What are the tensions that they're facing? And how do you see a relationship perhaps back to some of the election reform work that we're doing or other efforts that you think would be constructive to, because part of the language we use is like liberating elected officials to do the right thing, liberating Lisa Murkowski, liberating members of Congress from the the partisan and polarizing incentive structure. They don't go there to do it, but the incentive structure sort of drives that. So what's your perspective from a candidate side and how do we support these folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can certainly share for, I think Eric put in there answering the call, which is one of our first programs on the New Politics Leadership Academy side, on our C3 side. I think it goes all the way back to the beginning and kind of like, sure, being at the tip of the spear, but actually coming all the way back to basics, which is really focusing on that inner work. The answering the call program that Eric dropped in there is one of the very first steps that, oftentimes as we're even recruiting for folks, for service professionals to sort of enter the political arena, we ask them that they start with the answering the call, where you're really going and thinking back and spending time and writing down about like, not just what your intrinsic motivation is for wanting to serve in politics and serve in that way, but there's this whole thing called a shadow mission. Max Clow, who was our chief program officer that previously helped to develop it, it goes back to thinking about like, what are the things that would essentially kind of cause you to turn to the dark side? It sounds like very Jedi and dark side, but it's going back to those basics and spending time thinking about what your motivations are for sort of each step of the way. And then for us, as then you get closer back to that sort of tip of the spear, and there was a great question from William in here, like, what do you do to continue to maintain that accountability? I think part of that is still connecting with other folks. So it's taking pieces of both what Erika and Cynthia shared, of it's being in sort of cohorts, it's being with folks that can continue to have conversations and hold both you accountable, and also you can kind of hold them accountable in the different sort of pieces as you all continue to move along. So I think aside from taking some time to reflect and being with folks that you're within sort of this cohort, it's also all of us here that are sort of on this call, like there's not one sort of easy answer as we continue to kind of grapple with that. It's trying to really approach it from the different directions of whether it's the internal work, whether it's sort of the external pieces that we all have to continue to try and push and move forward with that change of what Cynthia's work clearly is helping to do. And it's finding the communities of people that, whether or not they're the ones stepping into the political arena, they're the ones that are writing the letters and they're the ones that are helping to deliver it. So, if I think of it from sort of the military strategy piece, it's, you have to have every single step. And I think it's wonderful that you asked all of us to come, because I feel like we each have a little bit of a piece of that.
That's absolutely right.
Oh.
It's an ecosystem effort, and I think we're in a season of possibility. I think there's a lot of things that feel dark and obviously challenging, but I think out of that sort of it can be a season of entrepreneurial revival. And I think the efforts that you each are leading are just a absolutely part of that story. And so grateful for your time. Maybe just any parting thoughts that you would offer, or how to stay in touch. Alicia, Erika, and then Cynthia, I'll end with you if that's all right.
I'll drop my email in the chat. All I have is really gratitude. I mean, the fact that everyone took time here today to even be sort of scratching the surface for all of this, like this is what I love. Our country. I love our country. I love our democracy. I love, the fact that everyone took time to be here. And to me, it's continuing to just kind of motivate each one of you to bring a friend next time too. And that's how we continue to make some change.
Thanks, Alicia.
I agree.
Erika.
I love being with this group because, of course, the military community is close to my heart. And I think more than anybody, they know what it means to be nonpartisan and to fight for the principles of our country, and to really be dedicated to that. So I am grateful for all of you for staying involved, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I also put my email in. I would encourage you to follow MWEG on Instagram. That's where a lot of our media literacy and calls to actions come out, and I'll put that in the chat as well. But thank you for having me.
Thanks, Erika. Cynthia?
Yeah, just thank you. I put my email address on the chat and the website, and I would say I'm particularly interested in figuring out effective nonpartisan strategies. That's a hard space to be in because there just aren't very many women's representation organizations that work on the right side of the spectrum, and none really with independent and affiliated voters as such. So I am always eager to think through more effectively how to engage more with moderate Republican women, frankly. So that's an audience I don't have as routine ways of communicating with, but I think is really one of the least represented groups in America right now. And I think that's a challenge for us all. So if you got any people who you think might be great folks for me to talk to, send them along to Todd, and Todd, maybe you can send them to me, because I think that's an important constituency that doesn't really have there are no advocacy groups advocating for moderate Republican women in office right now. There are a lot of people who are trying to primary the moderate Republican women who exist, and then there are plenty of groups on the Democratic side, but very few that are doing meaningful work, I think, with Republican women.
Yep.
I guess that's
It's
West.
most definitely a gap. Thanks for that, Cynthia. And if you listen to Jeff Clements, founder of American Promise, which is fighting for a constitutional amendment to limit money in politics, which polls, I think, 86% support amongst Republicans and equal percentage of support amongst Democrats, and yet does not move. He will tell you that this country goes through sort of 70-year cycles of renewal, and the constitutional amendment as a vehicle gets reinvigorated, and when it does get reinvigorated, typically several constitutional amendments can kind of flow at once, and also talks about sort of the resurgence of a progressive era, and typically, like, disproportionately women are leading that progressive era in the history of this country, and I think we could be at that moment again, and certainly your leadership is a manifestation of that. So thank you. And of course, we have other leaders on this call, women leaders in particular, Claudia, Lisa, others, Julie Lucky, who's been leading the effort in Alaska. I mean, it just, the list goes on and on and on. So while it is Women's History Month, we are certainly eager to shine a light on the work that the women are doing year round, both here at VAB as well as in other reform efforts. So thank you all for your time, and encourage you to stick around. But Eric, I'm going to kick it over to you to talk about what's going on the election reform side of the house.
Thanks, Todd. And thanks so much, Alicia, Cynthia, and Erika for joining us. Veterans for All Voters, we're radically collaborative, and that's how we've experienced each of your organizations, MWAG, New Politics, Represent Women. You all are great collaborators. We are lots of Navy folks on our team, so we believe a rising tide lifts all boats. And it's amazing how much you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. So one team, one fight, I think that, as I say in the Army. So I'm going to try to go around the country here in 3 to 5 minutes or less and call on a couple of people for specific updates. But here's my notes. I'm going to start with a little bit of bad news. Feel free to boo. There are active ranked choice voting ban bills in 12 states. This is where it would be appropriate to boo. I know a lot of you have your mics off.
Boo.
And I'll share those states everywhere from Arkansas and Georgia, Iowa, South Carolina, South Dakota, Ohio, Maine, and Minnesota. Those 2 states don't stand a chance. Texas, 2 have passed already, West Virginia and Wyoming. But we just got off a call with Fair Vote, and they were able to change the votes of 2 committee members in Wyoming, and they talked about the importance of long-term relationship building and how those 2 Republican members in Wyoming will now help build a beachhead to hopefully prevent bad bills from passing in the future. And then Kansas most likely has a veto-proof majority. They've passed a RCV ban bill. The governor likes RCV, but again, it's a veto-proof majority passed it, so that doesn't look so great. But let's move on to some better news. So on the Georgia bill, I wanted to thank our board member, Garrett Cathcart, testified against the RCV ban bill. He did a fantastic job. This week, VAV has submitted testimony in Georgia. Rhode Island has a pro-RCV bill to use ranked choice voting in the 2028 presidential primary. We submitted testimony in support of that bill today. And then Oregon has the Unified Primary Act, had a hearing yesterday for top 2 open primaries in Oregon that would allow 1.3 million unaffiliated voters to vote. Oregon's a closed state. There's about 300,000 veterans there, and so half of those folks would be able to vote in the primaries that they fought for and that their taxes pay for when we pass the Unified Primary Act in Oregon. Rhode Island, I mentioned positive bill, and then Henry, I see you on the call. Connecticut, I think, is likely to have a positive bill. So I'll call on you in a minute, brother. And then Oklahoma is a state that has a ballot question for top 2 open primaries. And the state legislature, because they see the writing on the wall that Oklahoma voters are passing very popular ballot measures, they're trying to make it harder for the citizens to use the initiative petition process. So there's a bill that we have a leader, Carrie Keck, in Oklahoma. She's getting her network activated to oppose this bill that would make it nearly impossible to gather signatures. And that's a play that's happening in a lot of states, unfortunately. All right, and then lastly, we'll go to updates from Lisa Rice in DC. If you can give us a quick update, and then Claudia Reisner on New Mexico, please. Lisa, if you'll go first.
Sure. How much time do I have?
A minute, maybe two.
Good enough. As of this week, St. Patrick's Day, yay, Monday, we passed the huge hurdle of a congressional review period. Every piece of legislation passed in DC, whether that is by the council or by citizen initiative, has to go on to Capitol Hill for a 30 congressional day review period. We made it through that. So that means we are now back in the council, and this phase is now fighting for funding for implementation. Our legislation was written subject to appropriations by the council. So we are now lobbying the council with a partner, Rabin Company. They're very, very good. And so that's what we're doing. We're visiting. We just visited with one of our huge supporters. I was on a panel with another supporter last week. So, every day something to try to get funding and implementation. And if you've been watching the national news, you know that DC is really under or in the crosshairs. The Republican House singled us out to cut our financial feet from under us. And so we are facing strong headwinds. I will use an Eric quote there. It's really tough times right now, but we're working it. We're working it. So that's my 1 to 2 minutes.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for all the good work you're doing. And I know you have a happy hour next week, I think, right? Next week, Tuesday?
Yeah. Did I tell you that? Yeah. If I told you that, then it's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Claudia from New Mexico and the semi-open primary bill, what's the latest?
Okay, great. So Senate Bill 16 passed the last legislative committee at 1 o'clock this morning. We've got 3 more days in our session, so now they start working through the night, but it passed. So it's going to go to the floor, and our speaker is a strong proponent. We're hoping it goes today, but it might go tomorrow, which is essentially the last day. So this trying to open up the primaries has been a project for about 10 years. This is the furthest we've ever been, and we are really excited about it. It could make it, so we'll see. I want to bring up just one more thing. Common Defense, a national group out of DC, did an all hands march on every capital and wanted every state to do that. We didn't have a chapter here, so 4 of us from the caucus stood up a Common Defense New Mexico chapter, and we put out a lot of press and information about it. 200 veterans showed up. We marched, we rallied. One of our veterans who serves in the Senate came out and spoke and invited us all up to the gallery. And we went up there, and the entire Senate acknowledged us and saluted us for all the work we're doing. And this is protesting the cuts to the VA. That's what we're really concerned about. So things are going well. Keep your fingers crossed for us for tomorrow.
That's great. Great work,
Thanks.
Claudia. Great job, in building grassroots momentum. I know Mark Fost in Wisconsin also participated in that rally up in Wisconsin. And then I was going to kick it over to Henry. Do you have any update on the latest from Connecticut?
Sure. Yeah. Happy spring, everybody. So Connecticut's got a lot of stuff going on. We have an organization I'm on the board for called Connecticut Voters First. Our big push is a ranked choice voting bill that's been kicked around for about 5 years. But the strength we have this cycle is we have a governor's working group on ranked choice voting, and one of our my fellow board members on that working group. So the bill we have is actually with our government Administration and Elections Committee, the Committee of Cognizance, and there's a public hearing on Monday for it. It's been chopped up quite a bit, but it's still better than nothing. But the language is a little bit bigger than we like. It doesn't it gives an option for only a certain subset of elections, and I think that was a compromise with Democratic leaders in the legislature. But it's going. The public hearing is on Monday. There's also an open primaries, a bill for open and earlier primaries. Both of these bills are coming out of the Senate. Both of them have bipartisan support, informally determined bipartisan support. The open primaries bill hasn't had a date for a public hearing yet. We do have and to get out of the National Popular Vote Compact, the interstate compact. Can everybody still hear me? I'm getting okay. So again, the ranked choice voting piece is going a little bit further than it has been in about 5 years. It's got to come out of committee, and it has to have either a joint favorable report or become a committee bill. We're on that path, and it's a path that's been stronger than it I think ever has been right now. So we're looking for a good turnout on Monday.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Henry. And Henry drove down to the happy hour down in New York City, so I got to see him a few weeks ago. And I posted in upcoming events. I'll be hosting a happy hour in Boston on Monday near Harvard. If you know anyone in Boston, send them our way. Check out the upcoming events page from time to time, please. And yeah, thanks, Ed. I look forward to seeing you in Boston. And Todd, I'll kick it back over to you, brother.
All right. Thanks, Eric. And thanks, Lisa, Claudia, and Henry, for those updates, and for everyone that's out there, doing things on the ground. We're playing the long game, and we know that we will be friends when our work is done. That's one of our organizational values. I want to, Alberto, give it to you for a minute or two to talk about, and I don't know if we want to do a little show and tell with Jameson, but I'd love to just, prime the pump on some of our evolution and messaging and brand. What's coming?
Yeah, I'll be quick and might not go to the slides just because of the time constraint. But I just want to tell a quick story to make the point here. I just came from VA, and it really hammered home for me why messaging matters, and especially values-based messaging. You could go on a 10-minute explanation about the mechanics of ending veteran homelessness, but when you're standing in front of a veteran who's at risk of losing their home or has been on the streets for months, that's not what's going to reach them. That's not what's going to impact them. What matters is the way in which we connect with one another. And so you have to meet with people, you have to listen to people, you have to make them feel like the solution's about them, not about policy, not about fancy statistics, but it's about their life. And so we've been thinking a lot about that here at VAV over the past few weeks, how we talk about our work in those sort of impactful ways. We have some really great, thanks to Jameson, some really beautiful slides about this sort of messaging shift. We have a messaging document that we're finalizing, but it's at its core, it's pretty simple. It's exactly that. It's about shifting from policies to values, explanation or over explanation about what this movement is, to connection with people. And there are just a few things that I want to say about how we're doing that. We're telling stories. We'll be putting out some calls for folks to share their stories of service, of their work in this area. We're talking about action, the things that we're actually doing, the amazing stuff Lisa's doing here in DC, that Claudia is doing in New Mexico, and that folks are doing all around the country. And we're going to try to center the veteran as part of that story. How are veterans an integral messenger and a part of that movement? And last thing I'll say is that we're going to talk about what we're doing here, the partnerships that are involved in this work, because we don't do this alone. None of us on this call does it alone. And so, again, policies aren't what inspire people. Values do. And so we're kind of undergoing a huge shift here at VAV from our website to the way that we talk about the work we do, to talk about that service and sacrifice in a values-oriented framework instead of a policy-oriented one. and would love to talk to any of you about what that looks like. So I'll make sure you all have my email.
Thanks, Alberto. And I think especially telling your stories, it's not just, Eric and I, but, in fact, it's the very opposite of that. We want every one of your stories as being the story that's out front and center about why you're doing this work, because you don't have to be doing this work, but you are, and you do it, and you come to this work from a place of your own values. And so we really are excited to elevate your stories through this next stage of messaging as well. All right, folks, we're at time almost. Eric, I'm going to give you the last word.
Well, there's one other really great update that I almost forgot. So you all have heard us talking about the Let America Vote Act for a while now. This is a bill in Congress that would mandate that states have to open their primaries to unaffiliated voters. And we found out this morning that our friends at IAVA, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, the largest post 9/11 VSO in our country, they are going to endorse and support the Let America Vote Act and get behind it. So that's a huge win for everyone. And next up is the VFW. So we have IAVA on our side, and we have a bunch of people working. If you're a VFW member, we have a draft resolution you can bring to your post. Reach out to me if you want a copy of that. But that's some good news on the lava.
That's great. Thanks, Eric. That's late breaking news. And actually, Reagan Anderson, I think we've put you on the spot before, but would you go ahead and just introduce yourself again and remind folks of the social media assets that are out there?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Reagan Anderson. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I was in for 6 years, just got out in November of 2024. I'm Veterans for All Voters social media and communications manager. Please go ahead, if you haven't already, follow us on our socials. I just in the chat dropped our link tree, and in there you'll find links to all of our social media pages, articles, upcoming events, so that you don't miss out on anything. Also, if you want to share your story as a volunteer about things you're doing locally, grassroots movements, it would be great if we could get some video content. If you could just film a video on your phone and send it my way. I'll drop my email in the chat as well. You can go ahead and send it to me, but we're really looking to share more veteran stories on our social media.
Outstanding. Reagan's been such a phenomenal addition to the team. Thank you, Reagan, along with Hamp and Tony. We're, I think for some folks, it can feel like an off season post-election. It is not the off season for us. We know it's not in DC, but it's not the off season anywhere. There's opportunities. And now in the quiet and in the curiosity of the American people is when we can show up and have a different conversation that isn't hopefully, a different sort of receptivity to the work that we're doing. So there's inner work that we all got to be doing. Erika, you reminded us of that. And then there's work out in the world that we all need to be doing as well. And we'll be doing all of it simultaneously and with each other. So thanks everyone for a great call, and wish you the best. Stay in touch with us. If we can help you in specific ways, please reach out to Eric, myself, anybody here. Thanks everybody.
Everyone.
Thanks again, Cynthia. Erika,
Thank you
Alicia.
so much. Really great meeting. Really appreciate it. Would love to sit in again just to be inspired.
Good to see
Every
you,
month.
Cynthia. Good to see you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks everybody.